Welcome back to another explainer made by Forge College. Today, we're literally strapping on our digital detective badges because we have a smart contract heist to investigate. We're going to be diving deep into debugging and root cause analysis. And, this fits absolutely perfectly into our broader focus on analyzing and mitigating access control flaws inside the smart contract security track.
Okay, so if you remember our previous lesson on testing access logic, we went ahead and set up our security alarms, right? We learned exactly how to encode those expected invariants into strict assertions. But, unfortunately, one of those alarms just went off. An unauthorized account completely bypassed our vault's checks. So the big question we need to answer today is, why did a non-admin just successfully raid our vault? I mean, how exactly did they manage to get in?
Here's our investigator's briefing for today. We'll start at the authorization crime scene. Then we'll set up the investigation, dust for digital prints, build the case file, and finally, we'll close the case.
Section 1. The authorization crime scene.
Right, so a failing access control test almost always points to a broken authorization path. It could be a lot of things, maybe a missing guard, a mistaken role identifier, or even some sneaky contract composition that's just bypassing our checks entirely. But our primary goal here, it's root cause analysis. Basically, that means we need to take that failing access control unit test and trace it all the way back to the exact contract statement responsible for the bypass. We aren't just guessing here, folks. We are establishing a direct, undeniable chain of evidence.
So our prime suspect in this little heist is an intentional flaw. The vault is actually using tx.origin instead of msg.sender in the only owner modifier. Now, take a look at this comparison. msg.sender is the direct caller, meaning it actually changes if an intermediary contract is used. But tx.origin? That's the original externally owned account that initiated the transaction. So if a developer mistakenly uses tx.origin for authorization, an attacker can literally just deploy a helper contract to bypass the check entirely. It's a total classic mix-up, and it's exactly what we're hunting down today.
Section 2. Setting up the investigation.
Okay. Before we start interrogating variables and, kicking down virtual doors, we really need to set up our environment properly. We'll do this using a local hard hat or Foundry test environment. We're going to isolate our investigation into 3 core files. Just think of these as your tools of the trade. First up, we've got vault.sol. This acts as our crime scene because it contains the vulnerable logic. Second is vaulttest.js, which is our recreation of the event, our minimal failing test. And finally, debugreport.md, which serves as our official case file documenting our findings. Honestly, keeping your artifacts neatly structured like this, that's half the battle right there. Now, the absolute most crucial rule of this investigation is this. Keep the vulnerable vault.sol file completely unchanged until you reproduce the failure locally. Keep in mind, everything is running locally against ephemeral test accounts, so we definitely aren't exploiting mainnet. But you have to resist the urge to tweak the vault code or try to fix the bug right away. Wait until you've successfully recreated the bypass in your test file. I mean, think about it. You simply can't solve a crime if you tamper with the crime scene before taking the photos, right?
Section 3. Dusting for digital prints.
All right, it's time to pull out the magnifying glass and get our hands dirty looking for clues in the code. Our methodology here follows a super precise 3-step process. First, we write a minimal failing test that demonstrates the bypass. If the test unexpectedly passes, meaning the transaction didn't revert when it was supposed to, boom, we've successfully reproduced the bypass. Second, we instrument the calls. This means we add targeted console.log statements or emit events to capture who msg.sender and tx.origin actually are at the exact moment of the call. We really want to capture that call context. And third, we shrink the scenario. Basically, we strip away all the unrelated setup, extra accounts, and any other contracts until we're left with the smallest, most isolated reproducer possible.
But hey, definitely watch your step at the crime scene. There are a few common rookie mistakes we need to look out for. For instance, accidental incorrect signer usage. This happens when you deploy a contract with the wrong test account, which actually changes the stored owner and masks the vulnerability entirely. Not good. Another major trap is assuming msg.sender always equals tx.origin in composed calls. They definitely don't. And finally, you have to be super careful not to accidentally alter the contract's timing or logic while you're adding your observation tools. You want to use pure observation points, like events or logs, instead of messing with the actual require statements. Remember, we want to observe the bug in its natural habitat, not scare it away.
Section 4. Building the case file.
So,
Once we've isolated the bug and dusted for prints, we really need to formalize our findings. You know, a good detective always writes up a solid report. Your final case file absolutely must include these 3 criteria. Number 1, a reproducible failure that shows consistent results across multiple runs. Number 2, collected, concrete evidence. This means saving things like the execution trace as a JSON file and state diffs showing the owner's balance before and after the attack. And number 3, a clear root cause hypothesis. This should be a punchy, one-sentence claim tied to a specific line or block of code, for example, pointing directly to that misuse of tx.origin in the onlyOwner modifier.
Always remember this golden rule. A minimal reproducer strengthens the root cause claim. By stripping away all the noise to create a sleek, single-file reproducer, you make that causal chain undeniably visible to any other engineer looking at your work. It's literally the difference between saying, well, I think it broke somewhere in this massive pile of code, versus saying, it broke exactly here because of this exact input, and I can prove it every single time. It just builds total, absolute confidence in your findings.
Section 5. Closing the case.
All right, we've found the culprit, we've gathered our airtight evidence, and now it's time to wrap things up. The absolute most crucial point to take away from this entire process is that these debug artifacts, you know, the minimal tests, the traces, the root cause report, they don't just get filed away in some dusty digital cabinet. No way. They are incredibly valuable. They actually become the definitive test cases that you're going to use in the next phase of your security learning journey to implement and verify targeted mitigations. Basically, when you finally apply a patch, you'll run this exact minimal reproducer again to prove that the vulnerability is actually gone for good.
Which leaves us with one final, very important question. Are you ready to take this evidence, patch the vault, and stop the next heist? Just remember, a vulnerability isn't truly fixed until you can definitively prove exactly how it was broken in the first place. To learn how to apply those mitigations and to explore way more Web3-related topics, make sure to visit forge.college and continue your investigation training there. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer made by Forge College, and I'll see you in the next